They clapped. When my sister stood up and said I was no longer part of the family, they actually clapped. My own mother laughed like it was the punchline to a good joke. And my father? He just looked down and said, "Maybe this is for the best." Hi, I'm Lauren, the daughter they thought would stay silent forever. But that night, instead of crying, I calmly reached into my bag and laid the truth on the table. Page by page, lie by lie. Why did a quiet accountant become the storm that shook her entire family? Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments, and if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way, I can send you a special greeting. Now, let's start the story together. I used to love Thanksgiving. The smell of sage and butter, the way pumpkin pie always tasted better the next day, the low hum of jazz from Dad's old speakers. But that year, everything felt a little too polished. The cranberry sauce was cut into perfect circles. The napkins were folded into swans. And my name card, tucked beside the swinging kitchen door, inches from where the staff came in and out carrying trays. I didn't say anything. I never did. Vanessa had picked the seating chart for flow, she said, and Mom nodded like it was gospel. I helped myself to a roll, buttered it slowly, and watched the others laugh and clink glasses. Joel was pouring wine. Luke was halfway through a joke about airport security, and Aunt Carol had brought her famous pecan pie, of course. She always bragged that it never cracked, like it was a family legacy. My niece Ellie crawled onto my lap at one point, her little arms warm around my neck. "Are you cold, Aunt Lauren?" she asked. I smiled and kissed her temple. Not anymore. But even then, I was bracing. Mom once told me, "You always set yourself apart, Lauren. People don't like that." She said it after I got a scholarship to UCLA. I thought she meant it as a compliment. I know better now. Dinner hadn't even been served when Vanessa stood up. She tapped her glass gently, the kind of gesture you see in wedding speeches or fundraisers. All eyes turned to her, except mine. I was focused on the gravy boat, which had a small chip no one seemed to notice. "I have something to say," she announced, her smile wide and rehearsed. Her red dress hugged her frame like it had been tailored for the occasion. Her hair curled perfectly at the shoulders, her voice steady and sharp. "Before we carve the turkey." I felt a ripple in my chest, something old and instinctive. "I think it's time we were all honest with each other," she continued, scanning the table like a hostess revealing the final course. "Last week we took a vote." Aunt Carol raised her eyebrows. Luke chuckled nervously. Joel glanced at Vanessa, his smile faltering just slightly. "A vote?" I asked, my voice low. "Yes," Vanessa said, turning to me. "We took a family vote." I looked at my mother. She adjusted her napkin. Dad cleared his throat. It was unanimous. Vanessa lifted her glass. "Lauren, you're no longer part of this family." The room didn't go silent. It went loud with quiet things. A fork clinked against a plate. Luke raised his glass. Aunt Carol whispered, "Finally." Even Ellie looked up at me, her smile dimming like a light bulb losing power. I didn't speak. My chest tightened, not from sadness, but from how unsurprised I was. "You've always been distant," Vanessa added, cold, judging us, always acting like you're better. "Because I didn't ask for anything?" I asked calmly. Vanessa shrugged. "You just never fit in." I placed Ellie gently on her chair, stood up and reached for my bag. "I guess," I said slowly, "if I'm not family, then these won't be necessary." I pulled out a folder, thick, bound, and worn from the months I had spent collecting. Receipts, screenshots, transfers, emails. I set it in the center of the table. The sound it made wasn't loud, but it cracked through the room like thunder in a church. "What's that?" Luke asked. Vanessa didn't speak. Joel leaned forward. "Let's see," I said, smoothing the top of the folder. "Who really belongs here?" The candles flickered. The turkey still steamed, untouched. Somewhere in the background, the jazz had stopped, Or maybe I just couldn't hear it anymore. No one moved. The only sound in the room was the soft crackle as I peeled open the clasp of the folder. For a moment, it reminded me of opening old photo albums. Slow, deliberate, a kind of quiet ceremony. But this wasn't nostalgia. This was evidence. I placed the first page on the table and slid it toward the center. November 2022. $2,800, I said, letting the numbers hang. Transferred from my checking account to Vanessa's, labeled emergency support. Vanessa crossed her arms. That was for Joel's job loss. Joel blinked. Wait, what? I didn't look up. Page 2, I said, March 2021, $5,600, down payment for your salon. It closed 4 months later. Someone let out a breath. Maybe Luke. I heard a fork drop. Vanessa scoffed. Why are you dragging this out now? Because, I replied, turning another page, I learned that when people show you who they are, I shouldn't wait for a second performance. My therapist had said that once, back when I still thought silence was stronger than truth. I placed the next page on top. It was a printed screenshot, blue bubbles, Vanessa's contact name at the top. The message read, "She's just a wallet with lipstick. Let her feel important." Joel leaned in. You said that? Vanessa opened her mouth, but no words came out. She didn't send it to me, I said. She sent it to Laura. Who sent it to me? Mom straightened in her seat, her fingers twitching near her wine glass. This is all unnecessary, she said. We're family. We don't keep score. I turned to her, voice steady. Family doesn't need receipts unless one of them's an accountant with boundaries. That silenced her. Joel was still reading the message. You called her a wallet. She's twisting everything, Vanessa said quickly. It was a joke. I pulled out the voice recording next. My phone screen lit up briefly. Then the sound of Vanessa's voice filled the room. She always acts so righteous. Cut the money and watch her fall apart. No one loves her. No one misses her. There was a beat of silence. Then Mom's laugh, soft, casual, unmistakably hers. Joel sat back in his chair, stunned. Aunt Carol covered Ellie's ears, her lips pressed into a tight line. Maybe it's time you go play in the den, she whispered. Ellie stood, confused, and followed her without a word. Her little footsteps on the hardwood floor hurt more than anything Vanessa had said. I turned to Joel. Page 3. He reached for the document with a shaking hand. A hotel booking confirmation. The Grand Hill Hotel. 3 nights, champagne package, 2-person spa. Charged to his card. Name on the reservation. Alyssa Green. He stared at it, then looked up at Vanessa. Who is that? Vanessa's expression cracked. It was a mistake. Joel shook his head. A mistake that happened for 3 nights? It's not what it looks like. Dad finally shifted in his seat, but he still didn't speak, just stared at the table, as if the wood grain held the answers. I didn't want this, I said quietly. Any of this. I just wanted to be treated like I mattered even when I wasn't paying for everything. Vanessa's jaw clenched. You kept all this? What kind of person does that? The kind who knew this day would come. Joel's eyes hadn't left the printout. Vanessa, he said, voice low. This was last year. I watched his hands, one open, the other closed into a tight fist. I thought you might ask, I said, and reached into my coat. The folder wasn't finished. I used to be the emergency contact for nearly everyone at that table. My name was on Dad's hospital forms. I signed for Mom's credit line when she said she was denied. I even listed Joel and Vanessa as references on loan applications I never got thanked for. But tonight, I was just a line they couldn't cross anymore. The air in the dining room had turned stale. The turkey had cooled into a soggy hush. Candles flickered down to their last inch, casting warped shadows across faces that suddenly looked much older than they had hours ago. And still, no one moved. I reached into my bag again, slower this time, not with flair, just with finality. A small stack of papers clipped neatly, no dramatics. I placed them one by one on the table. "These are for you," I said. "Power of attorney revoked, emergency contact status terminated, financial backup agreements dissolved. I've already submitted updated records to your providers." Margaret's hand shot out. "Lauren," she said, her voice warbling between panic and disbelief, "what are you doing?" I met her eyes calmly. "I'm confirming your vote." Richard stirred but didn't speak. He hadn't said much of anything all night, and I realized in that moment he probably never would. "You voted me out," I continued. "I'm just making it official." Margaret's lip quivered. "That wasn't real. We were just emotional. Families say things." I nodded slowly. "But they don't clap." She flinched like I'd slapped her. Joel, sitting across from Vanessa, slowly reached for the folder again. His face was ashen now, but his hands moved with a quiet resolve. He opened it to a dog-eared page near the back. "What about this?" he asked, turning to Vanessa. "The apartment in Austin?" Vanessa's expression tightened. "That's nothing." Joel didn't blink. "It's under your maiden name." "That doesn't mean anything," she snapped. "It does when the lease shows you as the sole occupant and the move-in date overlaps with the conference I paid for." Silence. The kind that grips your chest. Even Luke looked up from his untouched slice of pie. Vanessa's hands fidgeted. "You don't understand." "I understand enough," Joel said, his voice breaking for the first time. "You asked me to trust you while you were signing leases behind my back." Margaret tried to cut in, but I raised a hand. "Don't. Not this time." I stood, reached for my coat, and slid my arms into the sleeves with the kind of ease that only comes from being done. There were no theatrics, just motion. As I stepped toward the door, I paused, glanced back once. "You didn't just lose a daughter tonight. You lost your last shred of integrity." Richard blinked, but said nothing. Margaret's jaw worked, but no words formed. Vanessa looked like she might speak, but Joel's hand stopped her. I took 2 more steps, then turned back one last time. "One more thing," I said. I walked to the table, reached into my coat pocket, and pulled out a cream-colored envelope, thick, sealed, unmarked except for a small date printed on the corner, November 23rd. I placed it in the middle of the table, right on top of the gravy-stained placemat. No one reached for it. "I suggest you read it before the bank does," I said. And then, for the first time in years, I walked out of that house not looking over my shoulder. 3 days after Thanksgiving, the first message came through while I was folding towels. "You can walk away," Mom wrote, "but you'll always be my daughter." I stared at the screen for a moment before locking it. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. I just let it sit there. Another small flame that didn't need tending. My new apartment was quiet in a way that felt earned. No hallway clutter, no half-eaten casseroles in the fridge, just the soft hum of the heater and the cinnamon candle Ava had given me flickering beside the window. Outside, Cedar Lake reflected the late November sky like glass. I had found this place on a whim, 3 hours north of Portland, surrounded by evergreens and silence. And not a single person here knew my last name. The next day, my phone lit up again. Luke. His message came in 2 parts like a nervous confession. "Hey, I didn't know things were that bad. Sorry for not speaking up." A minute later, "By the way, any chance you could help cover my rent for December?" I let out a slow breath. I didn't feel angry, just tired. Vanessa's email arrived the following morning. The subject line read, "For Ellie." The message itself was short and clipped. "Ellie keeps asking where you are. She misses you. Also, Mom's mortgage is overdue again. The bank's been calling. I don't want to make this about money, but, well, you know." It ended without a signature. Later that afternoon, I received an envelope. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting right away. Large, looping letters in pink crayon. Inside was a drawing of me and Ellie standing on a hill, her hair a mess of orange scribbles, my stick figure holding a balloon. At the bottom, she had written, I miss you, Aunt Lauren. I sat with it for a long time, not crying, not even trembling, just letting the ache settle without rushing to fix it. I loved Ellie. That had never changed. But loving someone doesn't mean placing yourself back in harm's way. That evening, I found an old candle in a box, vanilla and cedar, the kind Ellie used to love sniffing whenever she visited my place. I packed it gently into a small parcel, added a note, and mailed it the next morning. I still use candles, but I don't live in the dark anymore. The next week, Eva stopped by with a loaf of cinnamon bread wrapped in a red kitchen towel. She didn't ask how I was doing. She just placed the bread on the counter and said, "It smells like December in here." We sat on the small couch by the window, watching geese move across the water. After a while, she said, "You're doing better." "I'm trying," I replied. "Some days feel like breathing underwater, but at least I'm not drowning anymore." We ate slices of warm bread, and she helped me update my emergency contacts. I deleted every name with Chen in it and added hers. She didn't comment, just nodded once, like sealing a pact. 2 days later, a letter arrived with my father's name in the return corner. It was heavier than the others. I held it under the lamp for a while before opening it. The handwriting was sharp and spare. "We're refinancing the house. Your mother tried, but the bank needs a cosigner. You won't have to pay, just sign. Don't let pride sever blood. Dad." No greeting, no love, just a request cloaked in tradition. I folded the letter and placed it in the tin box beside the rest. Not shredded, not burned, just filed. Some memories don't need to be forgotten, but they don't need to be carried either. "You look different," Eva said as she handed me a mug of ginger tea. "Like you finally exhaled." We were sitting on my small porch overlooking Cedar Lake. The spring wind carried the scent of wet soil and pine, and the air shimmered slightly with pollen. I smiled, grateful for the stillness. There was no noise from neighbors, no unanswered texts vibrating on the counter, no tension curled up in the corner of the room. Just peace. And Eva. "I've been sleeping better," I said. "Jogging in the mornings. I even made real breakfast yesterday." "Bacon and eggs?" she teased. "Steel-cut oats and blueberries." She raised her eyebrows. "Look at you, reformed." I laughed softly. It was the kind of laugh that comes from the chest, not the throat, the kind I hadn't heard from myself in a long time. Most mornings now started the same. I jogged along the trail that hugged the lake, watching the geese cut lines in the water. Then I'd come home, make coffee slowly, no more drive-through rush, and journal with the windows open. It wasn't glamorous. It was steady. In college, I once told a friend, "I don't need to be loved loudly, just steadily." Back then, I thought someone else would give me that. I didn't know I'd have to become that person for myself. One afternoon in late April, I checked my email and saw a subject line that stopped me. "Your essay spoke for so many of us." It was from a woman named Miriam who worked at a local nonprofit. I had submitted an anonymous piece weeks ago about financial guilt, about walking away from family not out of hate but out of necessity. I didn't expect anyone to read it, but it had spread. Miriam invited me to speak at a seminar they were holding in a downtown library. My first instinct was to say no. I wasn't ready. I didn't want to explain my story to a room full of strangers. But Eva just said, "You don't have to explain. Just show up as the person you've become." So I went. The room was small, maybe 30 people. A few women held babies. Some had notebooks. Most just sat quietly, waiting. When it was my turn to speak, I took a breath and began. "I used to think helping meant sacrificing," I said. "But sometimes walking away is the most generous thing you can do, for them and for yourself." I talked about boundaries, about how the hardest part wasn't the accusations or the silence afterward. It was the guilt I had carried for years without questioning if it was even mine to hold. When I finished, a woman in the second row stood up. Her eyes were glassy. "You just told my whole life," she said. I stepped down from the podium and hugged her. not out of performance, but because I meant it. That night, I drove home with the windows down. The lake glimmered under the moon, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to outrun anything. Later, as I was putting away books in the living room, I found a small photo tucked into a journal. It was from 2 summers ago. Ellie asleep on my shoulder after a long hike. Her hair was tangled, her cheeks sun-flushed. I remembered how she had asked if we could stop for ice cream and how we sang old songs on the drive home. I sat with that memory. It didn't crush me. It didn't drag me back. It just settled beside me, quiet and whole. I lit a new candle, lavender and oak. No occasion, no guests, just me. The scent filled the room slowly, gently. I opened my in case of emergency file, deleted a few names and left only 2, mine and Eva's. As I stood to rinse out my tea mug, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and found a small envelope lying on the welcome mat. No stamp, no return address, just my name, Lauren. Inside the envelope was a single page. Ellie had drawn us again, 2 stick figures holding hands beneath a sun that took up half the sky. The grass was a bright patch of green, and we both had huge smiles. At the bottom, in crooked letters, she had written, "I still love you." I traced the line with my finger. My chest tightened, not from regret, but from the weight of something I hadn't known how to name. Love that stayed even when everything else fell away. Dad once told me, "You take things too personally," as if that were a flaw, but it turned out that's exactly what saved me. I took the silence personally, the jokes, the claps, the long years of never being seen, and because I took it personally, I finally left. It was Christmas morning. Snow had fallen lightly overnight, dusting the pine trees beyond my porch in a thin white hush. The fireplace glowed softly. Jazz played from my little speaker, nothing loud, just the kind of music that fills a room without asking for attention. I stirred cocoa on the stove, added a splash of oat milk, and leaned into the comfort of quiet. I found a simple wooden frame and slid Ellie's drawing inside. It fit perfectly. I placed it on the bookshelf, next to my journal and the tin box that held the letters I no longer opened. That drawing didn't belong with them. It wasn't part of the weight I had carried. It was a thread I chose to keep. I spent the morning baking. Cinnamon apple pie, Ellie's favorite. I didn't plan to eat it. Around noon, I bundled up, placed the pie in a foil tin, and walked 3 blocks to Eva's place. I left it on her porch with a small note. "Merry Christmas. I'll bring the cinnamon tonight." I walked to Cedar Lake next. The path was dotted with sled tracks, small boot prints, and laughter echoing from the nearby hill. I watched a group of kids race down together, tumbling into powdery heaps. I didn't flinch. I didn't turn away. I just watched them with the kind of ease that comes when the past no longer demands a reaction. Back home, I checked my voicemail. 1 new message, my father's number. I hovered over it for a second, then pressed delete without listening. Some doors don't need slamming, they just need locking. As I poured more cocoa, my phone lit up. Eva. "Bring cinnamon if you're coming." Me. Already packed. Before I left, I stood in front of the mirror, not to fix anything, just to look. My reflection stared back, tired maybe, but peaceful. "I didn't lose my family," I whispered. "I just lost the people pretending to be one." I reached for the lavender and oak candle on the windowsill, lit it, and let the scent drift through the room. It filled the air slowly, like breath returning after too long underwater. I exhaled, long and easy. "Finally," I said aloud, "mine." That Christmas morning, as the candlelight warmed my quiet home, I finally understood. Peace doesn't arrive with a bang, but with the steady breath you no longer have to hold. I didn't walk away to punish anyone. I walked away to protect what little of myself I still recognized. Sometimes, love means letting go of the places that never learned to hold you gently. And healing? It's choosing kindness without making yourself smaller. If this story echoes something in your heart, I'd be honored to hear what it stirred in you.